Okay, I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on how to operate these THIII controls. There are two buttons right here. This one will control the upper cavity and this one will control the lower cavity. So when I turn the unit on, you can see that the yellow light comes on. That means that the upper cavity is actually the one I'm controlling with these button pushes right now. Okay, you can see that when I've pushed the power button, it automatically immediately becomes a holding cabinet, because the light on the holding temperature indicator is turned on. I'll go through these icons real quickly. This is your cook temperature. This would be your cooking time. Alternatively, you can use a probe, so that would be your probe cutoff temperature. We'll talk about that in a minute. And this is your holding temperature. Unless you activate a cooking temperature, it will strictly be in a hold mode. Okay, so if right now, if we'd like to change the hold temperature, we press the hold button and then we use the up and down arrows to adjust that. Okay, it's very, very simple. In order to activate a cooking process, all we need to do is push the cook button, and the same as with the holding, we can adjust the temperature. Now, 90% of the stuff that we're going to cook is going to be in the 250 degree range, so a lot of times you won't have to adjust that, but if you want to, you just push the button and you can go up and down. Okay. As you can see, there are two lights right here flashing back and forth. It's asking the user, would you prefer to cook by time or by probe? And what that means is, if I go by time, I would cook at 250 degrees until the timer elapsed, and then it would change to the holding temperature, whatever that is. If I use the probe temperature, it will cook at 250 degrees until the probe reads the food in the oven to be whatever the set temperature is. For example, let's say we set that to 105 degrees. It will cook at 250 until the internal temperature of the food is 105 degrees. Then the oven will cool down to a holding temperature. Okay, so in this case, as the example, we're going to use a timer. So I'll press the timer. It says 2 hours and 1 minute. I'm going to just push the down arrow and make it 2 hours. You'll have to consult your manual or whatever other recipes that you have to find out what the precise time is for your individual item you're cooking, but in this example we'll use 2 hours. So now that we've activated our cook time, our cook temperature, our cook time of 2 hours, we may need to adjust our hold temperature according to our recipe. In this case, I'm going to adjust that down to 140, and that is an entire cooking process. It's really only three things: cook temperature, cook time, and hold temperature. So at this point, if we kind of wait for this to begin, you'll notice that there is an arrow here, an up arrow next to a thermometer, and that indicates that the oven is in the preheat mode. And you'll see it occasionally, it will flash this number. It says 43. It starts at 45, which means that it takes approximately 45 minutes for this entire cavity to raise up to 250 degrees. So you probably want to get to this point before you actually go and start getting some of your product ready. Meaning, if you have the oven set up and in preheat mode, then go grab your meat or whatever it is and start prepping that. Then 45 minutes later, when you come back, you can go ahead and load the oven with the product. Okay. Let's just imagine at this time that, because we're not going to make a 45-minute long video, let's imagine that this timer has expired all the way down to 0. What you'll hear is a series of beeps, 3 beeps, maybe every, 15, 20 seconds or whatever it is. That's indicating from the oven, no matter where you are in the room, you should be able to hear that the oven is in fact ready to be loaded with food. So at that time, you would simply open the door and put the food in, and then close the door, and you would then at that point push start. Okay, so right now you are actually actively cooking at 250 degrees. It'll flash back and forth between the temperature and now the time. So it's 2 minutes. I mean, sorry, 2 hours. But after another minute, it'll of course go down to 1 hour and 59, and so on. After that timer's expired, you will see that the light above the hold mode will become activated. So you'll no longer be in the cook mode, you will be in the hold mode, and you'll be holding at 140 degrees. We can always check what our hold temperature is by tapping that button, but then it'll go back to scrolling between those two indicators. Okay. Let's turn off real quick and go through a couple other simple things. If I push the timer, push the cook temp, and I push the probe button, the difference here is that, well, there isn't much difference. I need to adjust my our cutoff temperature. So what this means is when the internal temperature of the product inside the oven reaches, for example, in this case, 100 degrees, then the oven will start to drop from 250 down to 140. It's important to remember or to understand that although the product will only be 100 degrees, by the time the temperature drops from here to here, this temperature will probably rise approximately 30 degrees on a prime rib or something like that. Now if you have something smaller, it may rise even more. So this formula, cook at 250 until the product is 100 degrees and hold it at 140, is exactly the right recipe to cook something like a prime rib or a strip loin or something of that size to 130 degree rare. Now why are we setting the temperature for the hold to 140? That's because on a larger product such as a prime rib or any of your larger roasts, the oven will never actually equal the exact temperature of the food. The food will come up, but it'll stop about 10 degrees below the food temperature. You can see that our timer has gone down to 44. So in any case, because there's no food in the oven and the probe is just sitting in there by itself, when it's scrolling through here, let's let it scroll through, you'll see the cook temperature scroll. Well, actually it's probably already done that. If I hold this in, it's going to show me the actual temperature. Now because it's just sitting in a hot oven, it's already clicked over, it's already much over 100 degrees, so we've gone into hold mode. Okay, so let me turn it off, and I want to show you one additional trick, or a couple actually additional tricks. Anytime that I set up a three parameter program of a cook, time, hold, or cook, probe, hold, instead of pushing start, if I were to push one of these buttons, it actually is like a car radio. If you hold it in until it beeps and the light illuminates, that program will become stored in that button. So watch, next time when I turn it off and turn it back on, that light is now lit, showing that there's a program living inside that button. So when I push it, it will indicate, or it'll actually call up that same recipe. I still need to be sure to allow the oven the 45 minutes to preheat before I push the start. Okay, but at least it has stored all those parameters in there. Now, if I would like to erase one of those programs, like the one I just made, I have to turn it off, turn it back on. Now I'm going to hold the cancel button and then hold that C button until it disappears like it did there. Okay. Let's do one more thing. Let's set this up, and it should pretty much go right into the hold in a moment here. But one thing we can always check is by pushing the temperature button and up, we can always see what the maximum temperature that the probe has read. That's very helpful where you come in the next day, and of course the meat that you have in there is on a hold mode, but you want to see how done it was. You use that function and you can see, well, it might only be 130 degrees now, but actually at one point it was 134 degrees for whatever reason. At least it gives you an indicator of what's happened in the oven. And one other thing I'll show you is that if you tap the power button and the up arrow, you'll get a lock that appears. That means that no matter what I do with these buttons, it won't change anything, which is really important if you leave at the end of a work day and you want to leave the oven running overnight, which is very common. Nobody will be able to change the controls. Of course, to unlock it, all we do is tap that power button and then tap the down arrow and it unlocks it. Okay. I'm going to turn the video off, and then we're going to take a few videos from the inside of the oven in a moment to show you a few things as well. Okay, there are a few other important things that you need to remember when using the oven. Most of your cooking procedures, especially for roasts and so on, will indicate the vent should be half open. This position is referring to the vents being sort of at a 45-degree angle like this. It's important because it allows a little fresh oxygen in, and it allows also for a little bit of air circulation to even out the temperatures within the oven. The other thing is that we just want to remember to always sanitize the probe. It does have a removable probe, so you want to make sure that the probe is in position before you start cooking. And you want to sanitize the probe before you stick it into your food. And you want to try to stick the probe where the tip of it is in the center of the product. Okay? Other than that, the unit is fairly simple to use, and if you follow these procedures, you will get a very consistent product every day.